So I know there's just a big line at the security door. And by the time my opening remarks are finished and we have maybe a few comments by my colleagues, we should have everyone close to being here.
Pause for a second. Let Elaine get the cameras and stuff ready.
So Elaine's got to get the cameras ready. So I got to warn you, at the last roundtable we had, I had an exchange with Colonel Science that went viral. So it's like almost 250,000 people have viewed that interaction. So, you may be a star today. But I have a sense that, that everybody's eager to get started. But first of all, let me just say good morning to everybody. I want to thank, are we ready to go?
Yes.
Okay. I want to thank everyone for being here, and as always, your willingness to sit down with us and share your perspectives. That's what we're here to hear today. It has long been true that veterans are their own best advocates. From the bonus army all the way through the PACT Act, we know great things can be achieved when your voices are in harmony. So I appreciate being able to hear from you all regularly and to act on the priorities that you share. I'm hopeful that today's discussion on the present and future of veterans benefits is a robust one, and I hope that, as always, you feel free to speak candidly in sharing your viewpoints. Given that we're fast approaching the end of the year and the beginning of the second session of the 119th Congress, I thought that now would be a good time to take stock of the last 10 months and to talk about the next several months. We are at a pivotal moment with respect to the future of veterans benefits. We see them under attack from external forces under the banners of Project 2025, The Economist magazine, and more recently, the Washington Post's series of reports, although some of you have already talked to me about the most recent Washington Post article. We see them under attack from within as the Department of Veterans Affairs starts to roll back the PACT Act, and we are seeing various legislative proposals that erode the benefits veterans have already gained or forces a false choice between which veterans benefit and which veterans pay. We see them under attack from private corporations and venture capitalists who seek to enrich themselves by siphoning money away from veterans directly and the department itself. It is human nature when facing these pointed, multifaceted attacks to focus on playing defense. It can feel like a fool's errand to ask for more when you're trying to prevent benefits from being taken away. However, I want you all to know that as far as I am concerned, these things are not mutually exclusive. More to the point, it is possible, absolutely possible, and absolutely necessary to fight this battle on all fronts. We can and should be protecting what veterans have earned. We can and should work toward expanding benefits eligibility beyond what currently exists. That is what I and my caucus are attempting to do. Now, in that vein, in the absence of a significant number of full committee hearings this year on expanding benefits, we have held a series of roundtables aimed at bringing to light the injuries, illnesses, communities, and causes that thus far haven't been brought into the tent. And we'll be holding more as we round out this year and move into the next year. Now, my intent is to turn the information from these roundtables into legislative action. And I can assure you, my staff is already hard at work on doing just that. But to ensure that we're focusing our energies on the right things, we need clarity from you all on shared priorities and desired outcomes. Should we be focusing on systemic reform? Is it new or expanded presumptions of service connection, or all of the above? With veterans benefits being subjected to misleading and negative press, how should Congress approach policy making at this moment? Moreover, we are in the midst of the longest federal government shutdown in American history, and while most direct veterans benefits are somewhat insulated from the effects of that, the wider social safety net, which many veterans and active duty service members rely upon, is certainly at risk of failing. And as such, I would certainly appreciate your thoughts on how we can and should ensure that no veteran or family falls through the cracks through, the safety net that protects all Americans. So again, I would say that I hope that you will share your unvarnished opinions with us on the present and future state of veterans' benefits. I hope that by the end of this session today, with your help, we can begin to chart a path toward ensuring that VA is adequately serving all who served, their families, and their communities. And with that, I want to just give a brief moment to my colleague, Nikki Budzinski, to say a few words of welcome.
Thank you. Welcome to everyone. I want to thank our ranking member for pulling this event together, to the VSOs and the veterans that are here. I, too, look forward to a robust discussion. I'm very honored to serve on the House Veterans Affairs Committee with our ranking member. I would just echo, exactly what Representative Takano emphasize to you, is that we really want to hear from you directly on what you see is happening on the ground. I would share with you in my district, when I visit with veterans, they are very concerned about all that's happening within the VA, what is happening with this now historic shutdown. I can attest to hearing from veterans in the district that they are seeing a delay in services. My office tries to triage that. We ourselves are facing challenges in reaching into the VA, obviously during this time of the shutdown. But I wasn't here for the passage of the PACT Act, unfortunately. But I have taken very serious my role since coming to Congress and helping with that implementation, and knowing the importance of it to veterans all across this country. And in order to see the successful implementation of the PACT Act, we need a robust VA workforce who has been under assault over this last year by this administration. And so coupling the historic nature of this shutdown and the pressures that has put on the VA, in addition to the furloughs that have been happening since January, just very concerned about the workforce's capacity and the VA's ability to respond in the way in which our veterans deserve. And so I just look forward to hearing from you. Appreciate this opportunity to Ranking Member Takano. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And I'm going to recognize a great veteran and a great patriot, Congressman Eugene Vindman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Takano, and thank you to the folks that came out today. And I had an opportunity actually just a few minutes ago to reconnect with somebody I served with, Colonel Sains, in Germany. I was garrison commander. I was his attorney, so it's great to see a fellow vet. So let me start by just saying that, we saw yesterday, last night in Virginia certainly, and around the country, a pretty stinging rebuke to the policies of this president, and frankly, lack of focus on veterans issues and the needs of the American people. And this is, in my opinion, the most profoundly unfriendly administration to veterans that I've seen potentially ever. And clearly, chaos and cruelty are not popular policy. So let's have that as a starting point for our discussion, I think. So I'm Congressman Eugene Vindman. I represent the 7th District in the Great Commonwealth of Virginia. As a 25-year Army veteran and a member of the House Armed Services Committee, I know just how much our veterans sacrifice to serve this country. My wife and I both served, my brothers served, and my nephew continues to serve in uniform. 72,000 veterans call my district home, along with more than 685,000 across Virginia. Right now, they're being thanked for their service by the most horrific attacks from the Trump administration. Since my first day in office, Donald Trump has made it his mission to make the lives of our veterans harder. Now Republicans, who earlier this year tried to cut $23 billion from the Toxic Exposure Fund, are trying to use vets, their care, and the Department of Veteran Affairs as political pawns in this government shutdown. That's unacceptable. There are certainly hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of veterans affected by the unclear whether the SNAP benefits will continue, when they're going to be paid. And we're breaking our solemn promise to those veterans right now. The stakes are real. Not only are 1.2 million veterans households at risk from losing their SNAP benefits, but 4,434 VA facilities face severe occupational staffing shortages, and 41 occupations have been identified as having severe shortage problems. One of these facilities is in my district. The VA Healthcare Center in Fredericksburg, Virginia, opened in February. I was at the ribbon cutting. It was a magnificent event, $359 million facility that was supposed to be providing timely, high-quality care to those who have served. 23,000 was the estimated vet population. Instead, they are critically understaffed, and those seeking care are subject to long wait times. When I asked the VA how long until they'd be fully staffed, they told me 2 years. That's unacceptable. And despite repeated outreach by my office to the Department of Veterans Affairs, we continue to receive no actionable solutions to fix this issue. This nation promised to provide veterans with needed medical care after their service. By refusing to meet our requests to hire more staff, the VA is breaking that promise. The bottom line is this: veterans across the country are not receiving the care that they deserve, and this failure lies at the hands of Republicans. Thank you all for being here today, and for those of you who have served yourselves, thank you for your service and sacrifice. I'm looking forward to your insight during these challenging times for veterans as we continue in our fight to protect these vital benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. So it has been several months since we've come together at VSO hearings, and that we had the joint hearings that we had last February and March to talk about priorities. And since that time, some things may have become more urgent than the priorities that you enunciated then, and others have become more longer-term policy goals. Why don't we take this opportunity now to have you voice what you see as the most pressing and emergent veterans benefits policy priorities that we in Congress should focus on right now. So if you want to just put your card up to be recognized, turn your nameplate up on its end. We'll call you in order. So Lori, go ahead. Lori, just make sure you speak in the mic. This is the sound kind of.
So
I have to remind myself to do that all the time.
Include all the thank yous in the notes.
Yes.
Thank you. But I won't talk about some of the most pressing issues because I know my colleagues have addressed those before, and we second those as well, particularly on the fraud issues. DAV, PVA, VFW spoke so powerfully to the hidden injuries and the long-time service impacts that we have. I would start with, we can help you with the stories of your veterans, all of our veterans who are being impacted. So as you need that for evidence, we can help you with RFIs and letters. One of the things that I will continue to repeat at every session, and I know this is what you're talking to, we can't get information. We can't get data. They have stopped collecting data. They have stopped disaggregating data so that we can speak to our individual communities that are most vulnerable. And I know, as you said, Chairman, Ranking Member, maybe that was foreshadowing, it may be perceived as a fool's errand to keep beating the drum that we need data, we need information, and we need to serve these veterans. But it shows that we all care, that we're doing something, and we're forming a historical record of the impact of this lack of transparency that we can use, and I believe with bipartisan legislation to address some of these issues. And I'm gonna ask for your indulgence. Those most vulnerable, who most of my colleagues won't speak to today, but I hope we have their support, the safety net that needs to exist. Trans military people are becoming trans veterans. In the military, they are suffering greatly from having served honorably and being involuntarily pushed out and purged. The problem is, we're hearing stories, you can't sign up for veterans benefits until you have a discharge date. Because of the chaos and the lack of planning, these veterans are told, you'll get your discharge date any day now, and it will be any day now. So there's not going to be a social safety net. They're being told they're not eligible to attend transition assistance programs. So this is a very vulnerable community that already has a high incidence of suicide, homelessness, financial insecurity, and these people are now trying to seek jobs, but they don't have discharge dates. And if they have to relocate, some of them have been offered jobs that they've had to turn down because they haven't been released yet. This is all while their court case is still in the courts. So what can we do about this other than to continue to collect data on the impact of this? And one of the greatest insults to these honorable serving members who are becoming veterans, they don't know what benefits and care they will be afforded. Those that they have earned, they are being told will not be available. Those that they and their dependents are getting through TRICARE now, they are being told those won't be available to them. Now, my organization supports a lot of minority veterans, and that includes women because we're a minority in the military. So I could speak forever on women's issues and MST and the Deborah Sampson Act on Section 5303, which I would love to work with all your staffs on. But I would say this is a vulnerable community that we hope we have your support on. They're being thrown into the water unceremoniously, being disrespected, and being shorted on whatever benefits they could get. And I would support those who have said, this is the 1948 ratings chart for disability benefits. I had never seen this since I retired in 2006. I asked all of my colleagues, have you ever seen this? No, they used it on me, but I never saw it. I'm not a math major, but in my world, 50 plus 20 makes 70, not 52. This was done in 1948 with the science and medicine at the time. This needs to be revised, so we hope that can be a movement. Demand, mandate, data, and reports, even if you think it's not useful, and mandate that people are given, when they're involuntarily discharged after honorable service, a law that says that any discharge date has to be at least 6 months out so they can apply for benefits would be useful. I know I've gone on too long. Thank you very much for your listening.
Well, thank you, Larry. Will Hubbard.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member, and the esteemed members at the table who've joined us today. Sir, as an educator, you appreciate the importance of a college degree. Today, as with the last 30 days, the GI Bill hotline is off. If there are problems, there are no answers. And unfortunately, there are some problems. GI Bill students have run into a situation due to an IT glitch that is not being fixed, in part due to the shutdown, that they are not getting paid. This is particularly hitting Chapter 35 recipients or survivors of fallen service members, which I'll let our colleagues go into in much more detail. But there are over 250,000 of these individuals not getting paid for months on end. That is unacceptable. Beyond the tuition, this also includes housing. Some of these individuals are at risk of being on the street because they cannot make rent. That is not something that we are willing to accept. We're calling for Congress to do a bipartisan letter calling on VA to turn back on the GI Bill hotline at minimum so people can at least get some answers. Whereas right now, there's simply confusion. Some of them are seeing some information in the press, but VA has said nothing. about the situation. Additionally, to this day, veterans who are defrauded have no pathway to get their GI Bill back. This is something that must change. But the question then becomes, why are people getting defrauded in the first place? A number of years ago, there was a school that the students purported to be a cult, an actual cult. That was getting millions of dollars in GI Bill tuition and funding. I don't think every school necessarily has to be Stanford, but at minimum, it shouldn't be a cult. Probably somewhere in the middle that's a good safe zone. So thank you for the time today. We would like to see, of course, as I think everybody at the table here would agree, a bipartisan end to the shutdown. We want our veterans taken care of, and we're grateful that you would host this forum today.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Will. I'll say that, I think my colleagues and I we would like to see the same thing, a bipartisan end to the shutdown. I will tell you that I did have a chat with Secretary Collins today. I was pleased that he made time for a chat this morning. I did raise the issue of a GI Bill hotline being turned on. I reminded him that the White House guidance on their own website says that when we have mandatory programs, which the GI Bill is mandatory, that he has discretion over declaring essential personnel to execute whatever is necessary with regard to fulfilling mandatory programs. And I reminded him, I said, Mr. Secretary, I do believe that you do have the authority to bring back furloughed staff and to address the IT glitch. 75,000 affected students is way too much with the shorthand staff you have to do manually. You need to address it systemically. And so I said, and so I want you to also know that my staff has been in touch and communication with the majority staff. I do think this is a bipartisan topic that we can together on a bipartisan basis urge the secretary to do what he has the discretion to do even during a shutdown. These are mandatory programs. VA has given advanced appropriations for them, and so anyway, I just wanted you to know that we've been working on it. Ryan Gallucci.
Thank you, Ranking Member Takano, for first of all hosting this meeting and allowing for this discussion on protecting veterans' benefits. To your question on where the priorities should be, from the Veterans of Foreign Wars, we've been very outspoken about the nature of veterans' benefits. I would request that that through strong offense, we defend the benefits that we have. During the Senate hearing last week, we talked to the issue of perverse incentives for veterans who file their benefit claims. I commented that things like concurrent receipt kicking in at 50% disability is a perverse incentive. What we've seen over the years from looking at veterans transitioning out of the military, I would argue that one of the greatest gaps is access to care, but not necessarily for the veteran, but for that veteran's family as well. Family care, CHAMP VA, doesn't kick in until 100% service-connected disability. State municipal benefits, property tax relief, many times don't kick in until 100% service-connected disability. If we really allow more equitable access to these benefit programs, I think we better serve our veterans. It may sound odd, well, we're asking for more. We're asking to expand family care through the CHAMP VA program. We're asking for structure. And we're asking to allow for greater access to ensure that veterans, when they file their disability benefit claim, that once they receive their rating, that a predatory company can't entice them to want to go a little bit further or go a little bit further. Also destigmatizing what veterans benefits are. I think we've done that deliberately through things like the PACT Act. And, the VFW was named in today's Washington Post article as well, trying to malign our program on military installations. Our program, Disabled American Veterans, was named as well. As if the public service that we're providing to transitioning service members is somehow malevolent, like we're trying to exploit benefits loophole. When I spoke to that reporter 3 weeks ago, I told her point blank that there's a stark difference between telling a service member who has been suffering with a chronic health condition to go to the doctor and get it documented before the uniform comes off, and then targeting them with ads to seek 100% for profit. I said it in the Senate hearing as well. We've testified before both chambers of Congress 15 times about the fraudulent medical exam issue, and it seems that one party continues to stonewall that. And that's tragic. I've appreciated the support from you and from your caucus on the issue of fraudsters entering that space. I know there will probably be some more dialogue on that. But last, I'll close with, when I talk about destigmatizing benefits access, there seems to be a growing mainstream narrative about, well, is it combat injuries? Well, you've heard us talk about honor the contract that we all sign, those of us who enlisted signed a contract that committed benefits for us. One of the clauses is to report upon order to combat or other hazardous situations, and a lot of people seem to not understand that second clause. Other hazardous situations. Places like Kachikarabad, places like service on a submarine, places like serving on an air crew, domestic training, overseas duty locations that could be hazardous. So setting the record straight on what veterans' benefits are, and that a service member can't just walk away from that contract. We honored our end of the contract, and we ask our leaders to do the same. And I would certainly invite the Democratic caucus, eager to have a dialogue on how to level the playing field on benefit programs like care access, like concurrent receipt. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Your comments on the perverse incentives, it's gotten me thinking of, the incentives of the CHAMP VA kicking in at, these things don't come unless you get 100% disability. And if we thought of these things differently, we wouldn't incentivize people to, by hook or crook, try to get that 100% number unnecessarily. But we want everyone who has disabilities to make the appropriate claims. We don't want people to not do that. So, let me just say one other thing. We've done code-Ls to bases. I'm forgetting the name of that program where you certify, you document these things beforehand.
Benefits delivery at discharge.
Yeah,
yes.
Is BDD.
Yes,
BDD. It's not universal. It's not everywhere. They've piloted it some places, and it's here or there. It's a little haphazard, but it should become standard practice everywhere. I want to recognize Dr. Morrison, Congresswoman representing the state of Minnesota. You have anything you want to say to the folks here, or just want to? Yeah, sure. Okay. Thank you. And I'm delighted to have my appropriator, your appropriator, someone who's been working on these issues longer than I have in Congress, Debbie Wasserman-Schultz. Debbie, you have a few things you want to say?
Thank you, Ranking Member Takano, and to all my colleagues who fight for veterans every single day and served in our armed forces. I think most of us know each other, but I serve as the ranking member, the chair when we're in the majority of the Milcon VA Appropriations Subcommittee. I'm really glad that if we actually get the appropriations process moving, which I'm hopeful that we do after we have a bipartisan deal that we're continuing to push for, that ensures that the Milcon VA is in the first package that we move forward for appropriations. I just want to focus for a second, and I'm not going to speak too long, but we have faced headwinds during the appropriations process and with the decisions that have been coming out of the VA, the rifts that took place, the lawsuits that have had to be filed. And the continued attempt to achieve death by 1,000 cuts of the PACT Act, and of ensuring that the VA remains a public entity, and that we don't privatize VA healthcare. We saw a 67% increase in funding for community care, about $14 billion with no justification whatsoever provided, which is normally provided by the administration. Still none forthcoming. Usually we make those the kinds of changes that they push through with notification and discussion, and when there is an obvious surge in need, which is not occurred. There was also an attempt to eliminate the TEF, the Toxic Exposure Fund for the PACT Act, which is the critical way that we have made sure that the promise and the certainty that we made when we passed the PACT Act to our veterans, that care as a result of toxic exposure would be there, was we put that funding on the mandatory untouchable side. And continuing to provide funds into that TEF is critical. I was able to offer an amendment and negotiate with my counterpart, Chairman Carter. He and I get along very well. We think similarly. And ultimately, we put $51 billion into the TEF. Hopefully, we're going to be able to see that funding survive the conference process. We have had Little 4 meeting discussions, and that's still an item that is under some negotiation, but I think we're pretty well wrapped up on it. But I might have to reach out to some of you to give us some added support. So thank you so much, Ranking Member, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well, thank you, Ranking Member. Thank you for being here. You never know what happens when you get the authorizer and the appropriator in the same room with the shock troops. So this is a special moment. I want to call on Bonnie Carroll.
Thank you so much. I am a retired Air Force Reserve officer, and I'm the surviving spouse of a soldier who was killed along with 7 other soldiers in an Army plane crash. I appreciate the support that each one of you has given to the families of our nation's fallen through our 2 legislative priorities. These should be the easiest things that we do. The first is the Love Lives On Act. Current law significantly penalizes surviving spouses if they choose to remarry before the age of 55. The average age of a surviving spouse at the time of loss is 25 to 35 years old, often with little children. They just would like to have a full, complete family, to find love again, to live a life. And the benefits that they have been given were earned through the sacrifices made in defense of our freedom, and they should not be penalized should they continue on with their life. H.R. 1004 has 120 House co-sponsors and should be a top priority for this committee. I thank you for your support on that. The other is the Caring for Survivors Act, and that would increase dependency and indemnity compensation for the first time since 1993, bringing it in parity with other federal survivor benefits. Both of these should be in the too easy column, and we certainly hope they will have your full consideration. We'd like to raise the DIC to 55%. That would be $454 a month, providing long overdue parity, as I said, with other survivor benefits. And this honors not only the sacrifices made, but the struggles that our families have in continuing on with their lives. We thank you for supporting both the Caring for Survivors Act and the Love Lives On Act.
Thank you so much. Jim Marszalek.
Thank you, Ranking Member. I couldn't agree more with Ryan when he talked about defending what we have. I think that's got to be the main priority. I think the Washington Post article really took a huge step back for veterans. All the outreach we've done with the PACT Act, encouraging veterans to come forward and file claims. The Washington Post article really hurt veterans that want to come forward. And now they're like, well, I'm going to look like a malingerer, or I'm taking advantage, or I'm a fraudster. It's just not accurate at all. I mean, VA processed 3 million claims last year. The Inspector General noted there was 180 cases of confirmed fraud. It's a very small number in comparison to the people that have filed legitimate claims. But the article really talked about, it made it sound like it was so widespread, and it just really isn't. So I think that's got to be a priority. I think addressing the claim shark issue is another one. The article that came out today really talked a lot about that as well. So I think that's given legitimate accredited representatives a bad name at the same time. So I think that's got to be a significant focus as well. But overall, simplifying the claims process has to be a priority as well. There are too many times that veterans have filed the wrong application, VA has told them they've done it wrong, essentially punished by saying, well, you've done it wrong, find out what the right application is, send it in, and that's when your effective date will start. How many veterans gave up at that point? Again, it's another huge step backwards when we tell somebody they did it wrong, when we're encouraging them to come forward and file claims for injuries and illnesses that they have as a result of their military service. Again, the outreach to them is significant. So every time that there is an insinuation that they're taking advantage of something, there are people that are not going to come forward now. And if you tell them they've done it wrong, they get frustrated and like, well, I don't want to do this anymore, and they're just not going to do it. And those that are veterans, we need to continue to outreach to. So I overall, protecting what we have has to be the main priority. Veterans paid for these injuries and illnesses through their service, and we can't let that go, unfounded for what they've done for us.
Well, thank you, Jim. We've been joined by Congresswoman Sheila Shurfless McCormick. Sheila, do you have anything you want to briefly say to folks, or you want to speak into the microphone? Yeah.
Much for being here. Our objective is to make sure that all of our service members can actually have access to their benefits. So I appreciate what you're saying about simplification. That seems to be a theme that we hear a lot, and I want to thank everybody for being here. I look forward to listening more and talking how we can push this forward. Thank you.
Well, yes. I want to thank all the members for making such a strong showing. But I just want to continue this process of having you report on and voice the most emergent priorities you have. But I want to just sort of put something else into the ether here. Watching the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee hearing last week, I can see that there is still a bit of, not just a bit, a lot of frustration with the Washington Post's recent reporting on veterans' benefits. And I agree that at best, their reporting was lacking vital context. At worst, it was explicitly conflating anecdotal individual malfeasance with systemic fraud in the veteran community. But I'd like us to move beyond just dogpiling on the Post reporting and talk about why an article series like that is able to be written in the first place, and what it may signal for the future. So just kind of keep that kind of back of your mind and have a response to that. But I want to continue to hear from everybody here about the most urgent priorities. So Matt Schwartzman.
of service earned benefits. Now, when I read the article, I first went back to an old adage that there are three sides to every story. And when I read that particular article, it seemed that not even one side of the story was even fully addressed. The article was hyper-focused, to your point, on these anecdotes, and it was in the space of anti-fraud investigations, claims, and prosecutions that seemed to warrant results that prove the integrity of anti-fraud procedures that are in place currently. But there are also those veterans, again, to the points made earlier, that unfortunately may, through years of honorable service, have rightfully earned benefits that they are being denied. What I did not see in the Washington Post article was any mention, for example, to the 2023 GAO report that showcased that for members of the Reserve and National Guard, they are less likely to have their initial disability compensation claims approved because of systemic challenges within the system itself. From 2011 to 2023, the VA approved 11 to 20% less disability compensation claims for reserve component members, and that was regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of branch and service. And to build on the introduction to the lexicon of this idea that being a veteran depends on whether or not you served in combat, this also was regardless of whether or not that service was in time of war or in time of peace. And so from ROA's perspective, there are a lot of different perspectives that need to be put out there and circulated in order to combat those dangerous narratives. I think related to your question about how this came to be, I think that despite the fact that the founders constructed a constitutional system of government that was intended to not necessarily move quickly, the nature of information exchange and misinformation is rapidly increasing as well, which is creating complications in the overall policy process. And so I think that it is incumbent upon the institutions, and I would say it's incumbent upon the Washington Post as well, to ensure that all sides of these matters are being addressed. I think the second co-equal priority, given the current situation, is the current status of VA's workforce. ROA questions the premise of whether or not reduced staffing will necessarily result in increased efficiency and also increased accuracy, which again touches on the Washington Post article as well. And the government shutdown certainly doesn't make this easier. And what we've seen is that VA's budget is increasing, but it isn't just because of extensions and expansions in service earned benefits. It's also because we've seen parallel investments made to the workforce that is ultimately responsible for implementing these expansions with the objective of ensuring that there is no reduced speed that comes at the expense of the veteran who may be waiting for that claim to be approved, who may be waiting for that medical appointment to take place. And so I think that when looking at the current status of VA's workforce, we need to acknowledge and recognize that we have seen increased efficiency and increased accuracy when it comes to the processing of disability compensation claims, when we see investments in a more robust, more well-trained workforce that's prepared to handle those claims. I found it interesting that the Washington Post article did not refer to the VA's most recent audit, which was performed, if I'm not mistaken, in fiscal year 24. And what that audit showed, based on my recollection, is that because of that investment in a more robust workforce, again, we saw more accelerated and more timely processing of claims, and we also saw a decrease in the number of claims that were wrongfully processed as well. So again, I'll point that out based on VA's own internal audit as well. And then the third matter I want to touch on is related to the Transition Assistance Program, because I think when it comes to scale and significance, that's a program that is intended to touch most veterans before they transition into their civilian life. And when the program works, it does work, that is proven, but ROA's contention is that it doesn't work particularly for members of the Reserve and National Guard. Now, Ranking Member Takano, your staff is well aware of ROA's 5-point action plan to improve the transition assistance program, and we've worked very closely to secure, for example, the codification of Section 571 in last year's NDAA, which would provide for a pre-separation individualized track for those in the reserve components under Title 10, Section 1142. But with that said, there's more that can be done. One example that ROA would provide is to actually increase expansion to the transition assistance program through amending its eligibility criteria. Right now, to participate in TAP, you have to have served for 180 days consecutive of active duty. This time does not include, for example, time spent on drill weekends or on mandatory training, even though it is a service requirement and it is a day in uniform spent. And so ROA's proposal is to amend that eligibility criteria to 180 cumulative days of active service to include both time spent on drill weekends and mandatory training as well. And so I won't belabor the other 4 parts of ROA's 5-step action plan at this point in time, but that, in my assessment, Ranking Member Takano, are 3 co-equal priorities and challenges that need to be addressed, and they need to be addressed very delicately. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Kayla Williams.
Thank you so much, Ranking Member Takano and other representatives who have joined us today. I want to briefly address your question of why this may be happening now. And I believe that it is part of the overall plan laid out in Project 2025 to chip away at the role of government as a force for good in the lives of Americans overall. We see in the Post article this effort to indicate ways that we could save money by breaking the promise that we have made to our nation's veterans. We could save $33 billion over 10 years by no longer covering certain ordinary diseases that may in fact be more likely among those who have served overseas, who have served at home and been exposed to various toxic chemicals. At the same moment that the government has chosen under this administration to send $40 billion to Argentina in 1 year. So looking at this comparison, it makes it clear that it is an absolutely absurd way to try to chip away at the benefits that we have earned through our honorable service while putting the needs of others ahead of us. I also want to mention the importance of VR&E in this moment, Chapter 31, Veterans Readiness and Employment Benefits. This processing of applications for VR&E has been shut down during the current government shutdown, which is not reasonable for everyone who is suffering by having no movement at all made on their applications for benefits. And that is coming on the heels of many, many years of VR&E counselors being severely overburdened with excessive caseloads that have led to slow processing overall. And having that looked at in the long run, I think, is also incredibly important. The really stringent requirements for what those employees must have for their own educations to be able to process benefits, and the overwhelming caseloads that are leading to them resigning at high rates and being unable to keep up with the course load for folks who are only eligible because they are already disabled. And it is incredibly important that we ensure that those veterans are able to access their earned benefits. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kayla. There's a number of issues related to the shutdown, the unavailability of the counselors to sign off on credits. But I'm going to cut my response short. Obviously, we're delighted to have the presence of the Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries. Mr. Leader, would you like to say a few words to the VSO leaders in attendance?
Well, good morning, everyone. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you. Thank you to the soon-to-be or once-and-future chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, Mark Takano, appreciative of his leadership. All of my colleagues in government who are tremendous champions for veterans across America, and most importantly, great to be amongst all of you, VSO leadership. Thankful for the continued engagement, for the partnership, for the ideas, for the perspective, for the strong encouragement to stay on the issues that matter to veterans all across the country that you serve in such a phenomenal way, particularly in the midst of all of the uncertainty that the country's been experiencing generally, but more specifically, that veterans are confronting. And our commitment, remains the same, that making sure that the veterans of this country are treated with the dignity and respect that you all deserve should never be a Republican issue, a Democratic issue, a partisan issue. It's an American issue. And as we navigate our way through this current shutdown, 36-day shutdown now, largest in American history, and that's why I was late and may not be able to stay for the duration, but wanted to make sure that my presence was at least momentarily felt to thank you for all that you do on behalf of veterans, for the partnership with Mark Takano and the members of Congress, and to reiterate, our commitment to decisively working on the issues that matter for veterans and your quality of life.
Well, thank you, Mr. Leader, and I certainly appreciate that you've continued the tradition under Speaker Emerita Pelosi of convening veterans on a regular basis and for staying the entire time to listen to everyone's concern. Mario Vasquez.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Ranking Member Takano, thank you for hosting this. To all the members of Congress that are here today and prioritize this, I want to especially thank you for making time and make this your top priority this morning. And Leader Jeffrey, sir, we are blessed and honored to have you attend as well and prioritize this and elevate this on your schedule. I'm not going to belabor a lot of points that have been brought up already, but two of our top priorities are directly tied into the Washington Post article. The first one is ending what I call the war within, which is veteran suicide. It's an epidemic, it's a pandemic, and one of the things that the Washington Post article is probably doing is creating a new stigma that was already mentioned by DAV, which is, I'm not gonna go get health care. And we already know that a large majority of veterans do not even serve on or get their health care by VA. And our fear is that articles like the Washington Post that is now convincing veterans who already don't want to go to VA because they don't think they're hurt enough, they're not combat veterans, they're not going to get the help that they need, and it's going to elevate and increase that suicide epidemic and pandemic. The second thing I want to talk about, and I'll keep this very short and to the point, we need to hold unaccredited and predatory claim companies accountable. We need to pass laws in Congress that are going to provide oversight and restore penalties. We need to ensure that VA is funded for enforcement and that we publicly list these unaccredited representatives in locations so that the veterans and the community and the VSOs can all know that what we are dealing with. And so we ask you for help in that particular situation. Both of those are very near and dear to our hearts. And I would like, in closing, to say the Washington Post isn't the first article that came out. Back in November, I was interviewed by Task and Purpose on an article by The Economist, who pretty much alluded to the same thing in a much less egregious way. And so this is a multi-pronged effort by some entity or somebody or some group of people that want to disgrace and not take care of veterans because we are a fiscal burden to America. Well, if that's the case, stop sending us to wars because there's a cost of sending us to war. Thank you.
Yes, Mario, it strikes me the Economist article and the previous Washington Post article, Speaker Pelosi used to call, well, it still calls, he says veterans are sacred territory. To me, the Economist and the Washington Post angles are trying to normalize sacrilege in our country, to normalize the idea that veterans are seeking to defraud and are on the take and are undeserving of, what frankly took all of us to get the PACT Act across the finish line. And I couldn't agree with you more that the claim shark bills to bring adequate penalties on unaccredited, advocates out there that are making a profit in the thousands of dollars. Chris Pappas's legislation, I think, is is severely needed. And if this community can align behind bringing these claim sharks to put a check on them and to stop their activity and to uphold the trust that Americans have in VSOs, who are nonprofits and who have advocates who claims or claims agents that are not going to be on the take or are not motivated by thousands of dollars of profit. This is a very important moment for us to seize. And so I know that when you all are aligned and can put the political pressure on a bipartisan basis, we can move things. And it just galls me, Mr. Leader, to see our disabled veterans cheated out of thousands and thousands of dollars of their earned benefits because of this corrupt loophole that they're able to exploit because we don't have enough penalties or enough enforcement on these unaccredited claims representatives. So this is we have to keep integrity into the claims process because we don't want to see the well poisoned for the millions of veterans that are on the hook. So as I mentioned before, there are several policy proposals which propose things like means testing, for example. We've also have proposals to pay for veterans legislation that may lead to changing eligibility criteria for veterans or paring back of benefits for certain communities of veterans. I will say up front that this concerns me greatly, and how Congress pays for veterans legislation is inherently problematic. I feel that we should not be asking veterans and their survivors to pay for what the general public should be paying for. And I know that your organizations have resolutions or are considering resolutions on these matters. And I'd like to know how you frame these issues for your membership and what Congress should keep in mind about these proposals. And I'll also say that in previous roundtables, we've addressed this issue of combat veteran versus veterans who are not in combat, people that, families and veterans that are frankly on bases with toxic substances, whether it's in Hawaii, whether it's in San Bernardino County, and inadequate review of the effects of those toxins. So we're talking about environmental exposures, not just burn pits. I think one of the priorities we look at in the next Congress, under a new speaker who's sitting next to me, is going to be, a PACT Act 2.0, because it's not just combat veterans, it's not just the active duty or reserve, but it's also families that have had to serve on bases. And I love the idea, Mr. Gallucci, that we find a way to not create perverse incentives, that we look at having ways for families to qualify for health care without having the veteran having to get to 100%. These are all things that make a lot of sense to me. So I want to call on Julian Plowman.
Yes, good morning, sir. Ranking Member Takano, Leader Jeffries, other members, thank you so much for bringing us together to talk about these important issues. And Ranking Member Takano, I'm very glad to hear you talk about the importance of recognizing all veterans and all veterans communities. I do think that the National Guard veterans often fall through the cracks, and we struggle to be recognized for our military service. Today, we see a significant imbalance in veterans' benefits between the active component and the reserve component. In 2025, National Guard service members should not be considered second-class service members. As a currently serving commander in the Maryland Army Guard, I can tell you that we are busy, and I know that you guys see that every day here in DC and across the news. Our country needs the National Guard. And we are glad to serve, and we proudly serve our communities and our nation, but we ask to be recognized for that service. And we ask to be compensated equally for that. For the GI Bill Parity Act, a day in uniform should count in a day in service to our country. The way that the benefit is currently written, it treats our service as less than. Somehow our days training are not valid for those benefits. Secondly, VA claims. A lot of our training is done on our own time and our own dime. We are required to keep up the same physical fitness standards as the active component. And while we do that over the course of 20 years, there's significant wear and tear on our bodies. Well, what happens when we incur an injury while we're conducting that physical fitness? It doesn't count towards our VA claims, and any expenses for the medical treatment of that are all done out of our own pocket on our own time. Lastly, I ask that you consider duty status reform. That's much needed clarity on the National Guard duty statuses, reducing it to a more reasonable 4 different duty statuses, and having clarity on those orders on the front end will give us clarity on our veterans' benefits on the back end of our careers. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that. And of course, we know that the Guard and Reserve is not like the Guard and Reserve back in the 1960s and 70s, where it was a place that people thought you could go hide out. We saw during the 9/11 conflicts that the Guard and Reserve were used quite heavily and were deployed almost excessively. And even now, the training tempo, the weekend trainings have increased, and we certainly need to pass parity for the Guard and Reserve, no doubt about it. Who am I calling on next? Is it Jose Ramos?
Ranking Member Takano, Leader Jeffries, and members, appreciate you having this conversation. You've always, I think to the point you made, Ranking Member Takano, you have always found time to engage with our community, the veteran community. So extremely appreciative for that. Whether you're the speaker or the majority leader, you've always made time and will continue to make time, I suppose, and we're very grateful for that. You asked 2 questions that I thought were very insightful, Ranking Member Takano. The first one you asked was, should the committee focus on systemic reform? And then you asked a question to the point of, where do we think, or what is this signaling for the future? And I maybe want to talk about those 2 specific things. The latter first. I think that we're entering a time where we are going to have a public discourse and discussion on how this nation cares for veterans. We have not had that type of conversation in a meaningful fashion over the last 20 years, in part because we've been a country in war for 20 years. And so we've gone from a 41 billion to 380 plus billion appropriations for the Department of Veteran Affairs, and without a conflict, I think we're seeing the collective want to have that conversation. I appreciate the question regarding where do we need to look at for systemic change, and I won't echo the sentiment that my peers have as it relates to the benefits, the compensation piece. I think collectively as organizations, we all agree that the articles were frankly poorly written, picked out anecdotes that frankly don't hold the water to an argument. And what I like to focus more is we need to probably have a conversation on where VA's core competencies lie as how we take care of veterans, combat or non-combat related. We spend a lot of time not talking about specifically, unless you're a specialty organization, on SCI, spinal cord injury. You know, VA probably has an obligation to be the best at traumatic brain injury, not just combat, but blast overpressurization training. They probably have an obligation to be the best at mental health, suicide prevention, spinal cord injuries, amputees, and environmental hazards. So I'd maybe end with, I think those are conversations the committee would benefit from having is where and how do we ensure that the VA is positioned to be the best place for veterans to get the care as it relates to those services that we owe and have an obligation to care for related to military service, combat related or not. So I appreciate your time and thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jose. I want to shift to toxic exposure for a moment, if we can. We've had two very productive roundtables prior to this one, focusing on environmental and occupational hazards this year. And it seems to me that the need is just as acute as before we passed the PACT Act. There is still a great deal of exposures, locations, injuries, and illnesses that VA doesn't recognize or cover. And too many veterans and their families are left waiting for help. And so I very much want to see Congress work toward passing, as I said before, a second large toxic and occupational exposure bill, or at least a large number of smaller bills that relate to this. Thanks to the PACT Act, we do have a new presumptive development process at VA. However, I don't think right now that process is functioning as quickly and as transparently as it could. And in the background of all of that, we have an administration actually cutting PACT Act benefits for the very first time since its passage, which is astounding to me, given the needs in the community. So what do you all see as the future for the PACT Act and toxic exposure coverage in general? How is the system working post-PACT Act, and what more needs to be done to better serve veterans and their families who are suffering? Colonel Science, the guy who went viral.
Ranking Member Takano, Leader Jeffries, distinguished members of Congress, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us and your continued interest. I'll keep my remarks short because, as you can tell, I've lost my voice cheering for my Los Angeles Dodgers earlier this week, and so it's a little worn right now. I think some general remarks that pertain to your question is that, as we've heard from all of my colleagues, of which we all, I think, completely agree on, is that we really need to work towards sustaining our benefits that we have already gained through this unprecedented attack that it seemed to be under, and I fully concur that it is part of a 2025 project to do so. And we need to reform our systems so that they become more accessible and less complex. And I think this also relates to the PACT Act as well. Over time, different acts brought together, and the decisions on how we will implement those acts through the Veterans Administration have set up very complex ways, not only to apply for benefits, but even to understand what those benefits are and who is eligible, mostly through an overclassification of groups. So different standards for active duty versus reserve and National Guard, different standards for combat-related, what does combat-related mean versus training-related. And I think that's something that we need to make sure that we look at as we go forward is, as we go forward with additional acts, how do we add into those acts to streamline and remove the complexity of all that has come before it? I think we just need to continue to move forward with the great work we've done thus far, but as we've heard, need to improve when it comes to mental health care. In past groups, we've talked about housing access. Transition programs is really where all this starts. We need to do a better job at developing a more comprehensive transition program with responsibility not only on the VA, but on the Department of Defense. And then we need to continue to leverage and save the PACT Act and present it in a way that is more understandable and easier to apply for our veterans. And then, of course, as the president of the Hispanic Veterans Leadership Alliance, I would be remiss if I do not also point out that all these challenges that we have discussed for our veterans are even more so for our veterans of the minority communities, whether it be because of challenges within community biases, may it be because of language barriers, may it be because of biases by providers and administrators. We should keep that in the back of our mind and look at how we can reduce and remove those barriers to our minority veterans. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Colonel. I understand that the Democratic leader has to leave. Thank you so much, Leader Jeffries, for being here with us today and giving some of your time today.
Thank you, and again, I just appreciate everybody, your service to the country in such an extraordinary way, but your continued service to veterans and the country through your VSO leadership, and look forward to staying in close touch, of course, in whatever position I hold now and into the future. Thank you all.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Leader Jeffries. Craig Romanovich. Mr. Romanovich, can you just pull the microphone closer to you?
Apologies, I didn't even turn it on.
Live stream.
Apologies. My peers here, I believe, have spoken very well on many of the questions you have asked. I would like to go back. It struck me very odd as we were sitting here talking about what we were seeing in the forward-facing articles and other issues that are going on and being presented to the general public. From an organizer's standpoint, this is a small group that is trying to control the narrative to the forward-facing public and create, let me use a different word here, compound a fabricated crisis in the VA system. We have an issue of funding with the almost 2 million claims from the PACT Act that have been accepted, which in my opinion shows the success of the PACT Act. Let's be clear about that. That shows the success of the outreach of the PACT Act to our fellow veterans that need that care. That crisis is being further exemplified by watching my union brothers and sisters being riffed in the VA, being told at the beginning of this current administration, we're cutting workforce to 2019 levels after we've seen 2 million claims get processed into the VA system. It is important that us, as the VSO organizations, continue to defend what we earned in the VA moving forward, and that sacred promise be kept, and partnering with folks like you in your office will help us get to that point and protecting my union brothers and sisters in the VA that serve a second time for their fellow veterans in our care. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Congressman Vindman?
Thank you. So a lot of the discussion is focused on, obviously, the veterans' claims and allegations of abuse, and that's an important topic, and I'll have a follow-up question on that. But as we look at making progress, both large and small, I want to maybe turn attention to an area of benefits, GI Bill benefits. And earlier this year, I introduced a bill, the Military Family GI Bill Promise Act. This will fix an outdated DoD policy that prevents many service members from transferring their earned post-9/11 GI Bill benefits to their dependents, particularly children born or adopted later in their military careers after they've earned those benefits. Specifically, Military Family GI Bill Promise Act would allow eligible service members and veterans to transfer GI Bill benefits to dependents at any time, regardless of when a dependent is added to DEERS, remove the requirement for additional service obligation once transfer eligibility has been met, ensure that no one is penalized for starting or expanding their family later in their careers. So I'd be interested in hearing anybody's perspective on this particular policy change. I know how important GI Bill benefits are to veterans, certainly important to my family, and if they encountered or dealt with this issue.
Will, go ahead.
Mics are tricky. Thank you for the question. We agree that, you know, the basic policy of the GI Bill as it pertains to transferability, you know, the intent was on retention. So if somebody has been retained, to block them from transferring it is silly. It's arbitrary, and frankly, it's capricious. So we think that it's something that's worth looking at. We appreciate your leadership on this bill, and we look forward to working with your office on coming up with a solution, because we regularly get calls from veterans who want to transfer it, didn't necessarily know the requirements. That largely stems from the fact that the services have different policies about this. That's very confusing. Additionally, we've also heard from veterans who thought they transferred it or were told that their transfer went through, and then once they're out of the service, for whatever clerical or paperwork reason, they don't have access to it. That's also unacceptable. So I think across the board, it's a worthy issue, and we're appreciative that you're taking such a leadership position on this.
Thank you. I think I saw Julia.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you for your work on that bill. I would absolutely say that is a great way forward. A service member should never be penalized for utilizing one of their benefits. And furthermore, Americans are having families at a later and later rate, and the current op tempo is making it more difficult to have those families earlier on in your military career. So anything we can do to make it easier for families and easier to utilize your benefits is much appreciated.
Great.
Thank you. I look forward to partnering with as many organizations as want to join this effort.
Thank you, Congressman. I want to call on John Stovall.
I think that works. Thank you, Ranking Member Takano.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
And distinguished members for having us here. Just a couple of quick points from Vietnam Veterans of America's perspective. I think our cohort of membership probably ages a little bit older than most groups, but I'm still shocked at the number of veterans who are not even enrolled in the VA medical system, much less applying for their earned benefits. My dad was a Vietnam veteran, never went to the VA one time in his life, because I think it's just a daunting process. I'm, fairly young, I guess, fairly smart, and I'm going through that benefit process right now. And anybody who's gone through it knows it's complex, it's confusing, and I think a lot of veterans, especially in light of things like the WAPO article, give up. They don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So we need to streamline the process. We've had meetings with the VA where they demonstrate AI, for example, in the quick submit application. I think that's great. We should encourage more veterans to enroll, not discourage them to apply for benefits. My friend Mario made a great point, and anecdotally, we've heard the same. When we stigmatize people going for mental care and applying for benefits, it does have a mental effect. And, we talk about veteran suicide. That's not the way to fix that. Ranking Member Takano, toxic exposure, I'm glad you brought that up. That's an issue that's near and dear to VVA's mission. We would love to work with you, of course, on a PACT Act 2.0, expanding conditions, presumptive conditions. The other piece that we've been fighting for is intergenerational research on toxic exposure. Mm-hmm. So if, a lot of our members exposed to Agent Orange, other toxins in the Vietnam War, their grandkids have conditions that may not, we need the research to conclusively link those so that their descendants can get the care that they've their parent or grandparent have suffered through. So we, for some reason, the VA over a number of years, has refused to do this research. But we need to find a way to have those studies conducted so that the proper benefits can be applied.
I couldn't agree with you more. The effects of Agent Orange intergenerationally, what the dioxin has done to fertility and other. I mean, I've seen anecdotal from anecdotal instances from your members in my own district, but we need a systemic study, and I also think that it needs to extend to the families that were on bases, and so it's Agent Orange exposure on naval vessels or on the land in Vietnam, but we have a lot of chemical and environmental exposures that military families were exposed to as well. So we need to make the commitment to study the effects of these exposures, not just on the present generation, but what happens, in future generations. Robert Thomas.
Thank you, Ranking Member Takano. I'd like to thank all of the other members over here present today. PVA is unique in our focus with spinal cord injury and disease. So I just wanted to make a few points in regards to the Post article. I know that there's been several different questions that came up that you wanted some of us to point out, but I did want to make a couple points, that we are deeply troubled by the narrative that being disabled means that we shouldn't work or leave our homes. That's against PVA's core mission and our civil rights as people with disabilities. We aren't broken, and it is expensive to be disabled. The disabled comp isn't the road to the easy life. It just helps us make a life. The special monthly compensation specifically needs an increase. Then we also need to focus on the claims process. Bad exams continue to be a problem that must be addressed. They lead to churn and waste. Provide us with the proper exams up front, and to sum it up, don't blow it up, tune it up. And if America is built on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, why take that away from the disabled vet? Thank you.
Well, thank you. I like that. Don't blow it up, tune it up. It's great. Nick Weinstein.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you very much, Ranking Member Takano, and any members that are still here. I wanted to draw attention to your point about a PACT Act 2.0, and I want to echo my colleague Julian Plowman's comments on how the National Guard can often be overlooked in terms of their service. The PACT Act and a lot of toxic exposure legislation currently addresses what areas where active duty often operate, not necessarily taking into account where National Guard folks are often deployed, including areas such as Kosovo. I've seen photos of areas of bases in Kosovo where the burn pits that are there look just like Iraq and Afghanistan. And we've seen MFRs from the Army and NATO addressing these burn pits. Senators Welch and Sanders have written letters to the VA addressing these burn pits, and yet legislation doesn't currently address the exposure of National Guard members and the effects that this has downwind when they retire. So I would very much like to work with your office and any other offices when it comes to a PACT Act 2.0 or any other further legislation addressing the burn pits that our National Guard members are exposed to. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Devin Wozniak.
Thank you, Ranking Member Takano. I echo what every other member of this panel has said today on pretty much everything. But to address your question about the PACT Act moving forward, unlike my colleagues, I think I'm maybe the only one here who has a day job not in the veteran advocacy space. I work for the Veterans Benefit Administration. I process claims every single day. One thing of note to me has been the focus recently on starting to try to downsize VBA staff in the wake of what I think some consider the PACT Act to be is addressed, is finished. This is putting a strain on VBA staff that has been exacerbated by the shutdown. Anecdotally, I can tell you the quality that I see in claims that come across my desk has decreased, especially in the last 2 months. But this is a long-standing issue that goes back every fiscal year. I've seen worse quality as an authorizer. Mr. Romanovich, who pointed out that there's been an attack on some of our VA staff, I echo that wholeheartedly. We need more resources to process these claims and also to address additional claims going forward. The framework to continue caring for veterans that the PACT Act put in place is tremendous. The claims aren't going away. They're only going to get worse. And this isn't through, as the Washington Post suggested, fraud or abuse on veterans. It's a recognition of some of the effects that 2+ decades of sustained conflict has had on our community and will continue to have. So I just want to thank you again for having me here, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you very much for those comments. I want to turn to a topic that we all care about deeply, which is about ending veteran homelessness. I've been alarmed by the administration's change in approach to addressing America's homelessness crisis, including the introduction or reintroduction of criminalization of homelessness, defunding usage and critical HUD programs, and removing support from models that we know work for getting and keeping people stably housed, like Housing First. And while most of this has been horrible, I have to say that I am hopeful about one aspect of President Trump's approach to homelessness, and that is his focus on the West LA VA campus. I did host a roundtable with veterans and advocates in Los Angeles back in August, where we discussed the future and promise of the Soldiers' Home. We have here with us Ms. Monet, and I want to thank her again for joining me in Los Angeles for that discussion. But I'd like to turn to Ms. Monet now to start our discussion about how this administration's approach to homelessness may impact veterans. So go ahead, Catherine.
Thank you for having me. It's good to see you, and thank you for doing this again.
Yes.
I think you're absolutely right that we are anticipating some change, and I think there is a degree to which the administration signaling changes has resulted in state and local governments also making big shifts that are counterproductive, I think. And one of the things that is really important for you all to remember here is that, you know, you have given VA these really great tools to support veterans who are experiencing homelessness, but not all of them have been funded. So they've got this toolkit with things that are so very close within grasp that are authorized that they just can't quite use. And I'm sure you're already anticipating I'm going to talk about the GPD rate, because that is the first thing you hear out of me every time I'm here. But that is the first thing that I hear out of every single one of my members when I see them. I was in Boston yesterday and I met with one of them, and that was the very first thing they said, was that the reimbursement rate, even though it's increased slightly, is not up to the full waiver that you all authorized in the Dole Act, and VA has largely pointed to the lack of appropriated funding for that. And I think that that's something that maybe at some point we can address if we get to a bipartisan appropriations bill here.
I'm sorry that Debbie Wasserman-Schultz left before
It's
you
okay.
could tell us this, but
She, I mean, she heard me say it at the Jeffries Roundtable earlier, and I'm sure y'all will hear me say it again. I think the other thing that is really important is the Section 4201 funding for veterans because, we're looking at some big changes to the SNAP program. We're looking at some potential changes in the HUD continuum of care funding. And one of the things that's really important about the 4201 program is that it gives VA the tools to really turbocharge their outreach, right? So they can pay for food. They can hotel people when they're in a crisis. They can offer transportation and things that, really encourage veterans to come in and seek services from VA in a meaningful way, right? Prior to that, they just had whatever was donated. Some granola bars, perhaps. And that's not enticing. I mean, I like granola bars, but nobody cares about that. So I would love if you all could really work towards funding that stuff because, when you look at the numbers, right, 1.2 million veterans rely on SNAP. And I mean, it's a dark day, right? If we know that there are folks who are housing unstable and are experiencing food insecurity, I mean, we know that the research shows that the risk of suicidal ideation goes up in both of those scenarios, right? At the onset of homelessness and at the onset of food insecurity. And so we have to do more for those people. But the HUD COC program is actually, I think, the biggest thing, right, that I wanted to touch on. There was a recent Politico article that looked at some of the proposed changes that we anticipate in the HUD Continuum of Care NOFO. And I think what we're seeing is that HUD is likely to cut about 50% of its funding for permanent supportive housing in that program. So if you look at what that means overall, it's about 170,000 people who are not going to be able to use HUD's funding for permanent supportive housing in communities across the country. One of my partners, who's really an expert on this, estimates that about 4,000 of those people are veterans. And I think some of them are there because they may be ineligible for VA services, but some of them are not. And so I think we need to really be mindful about how we're supporting VA through closing that gap for veterans. So there's a lot to do, a lot at risk, but a lot of opportunity, right, for us all to come together and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Ryan Gallucci. Do you remember what you were going to say? It was a while ago.
Well, a number of things have sparked discussion. Thank you, Ranking Member Takano. You had asked things about pay-fors for the future of toxic exposure, and then our colleagues around the table have brought up so many other great points to talk about where we're going with veterans benefits. I want to talk briefly about toxic exposure and then about pay-fors. On toxic exposure, it's absolutely true, and I thank you for using the words occupational hazards. I think that's something that's important to stress, and you're going to hear us continue to double down on that there are extensive occupational hazards in military service, and then on top of it, service members understand that when they join the military. Had an opportunity at the Senate hearing to address that head on as well, that when an American volunteers for military service, they clearly understand that military service is dangerous. But that's not just combat, it's training, it's other occupational hazards, and I think we need to be very clear when we talk about that. Also, when the question came up about working groups or a commission to study veterans benefits, I wanted to pivot that discussion to really making sure that we're following science much more quickly. It was talked about in the hearing that hypertension is an old fat person's disease. Well, tell that to a Vietnam veteran who developed it in their early 20s, in the early 1970s, and had to then fight for decades for that recognition until the PACT Act was signed into law. We don't want to see the same thing with K2. We don't want to see the same thing with air crews or submariners or any of the other occupational hazards that we all know exist in the military. Beyond that, when we're talking about pay-fors. You asked a question about where our organizations are as far as resolutions, and that's what prompted me to put up the marker. So the VFW at our national convention, we're resolutions-based, and so our members drive our resolutions. We adopted a resolution centered around our honor the contract slogan and a rallying cry, because again, this is an emerging threat to the veteran benefits structure, and one that we've seen before. I've seen it from The Economist. We heard it from the Washington Post editorial board back in 2023. And so in that resolution, it talks about making sure that we never erode a veteran's benefit to pay for another. It's very concerning that when we see proposals that would, for the first time, institute a funding fee for disabled veterans utilizing their home loan. Now, the home loan dates back to the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944. It's been demonstrated over time as one of the greatest economic benefits we've provided to veterans. Even at the time that funding fees were introduced, disabled veterans were always excluded from that. It would be a stark change to include disabled veterans in that as a pay for, and it would violate our resolution.
Well, thank you for that. And, you know, I keep reminding people that OSHA standards don't apply to the Department of Defense. And so there's just not, it is a dangerous environment. You may not be in combat, but that 70-pound pack that you're training with or that you're carrying around, that over time, that's going to have an impact on, I mean, your knees and your hips. And you know, I just lifted one of those recently. I'm going, oh my goodness, you know, my goodness. This is, I can see that day after day, week after week, months on end, that this is going to have an effect on your body. So, you know, this is a lot of, we don't want to, I think, play upon this narrative that it's only about the combat veteran, that military service is hazardous in a variety of ways. Matt Schwartzman.
Ranking Member Takano, I wanted to touch on homelessness first, because you had brought that up. Then I want to circle back to build on comments relative to the PACT Act and the pay for as well. From ROA's perspective, in order to combat homelessness, this really takes a holistic approach where support needs to begin during the time that the service member is in service and then continue through transition and then after that transition period as well. I've mentioned ROA's proposal to improve the transition assistance program, and my distinguished colleagues from Naugus and Angus have mentioned those systemic barriers that prohibit, you know, reserve members from accessing service or benefits. I'll use the VA home loan program, for example, and I've mentioned this before, that one of the requirements to qualify for the VA home loan is the member must have a DD Form 214. Now, for members of the Reserve and Guard, that whole process looks very different, and ROA is cautiously optimistic and hopeful that the unveiling and the implementation of the DD Form 214-1 will better position these service members in order to qualify for some of these service earned benefits. And we would encourage and implore a close monitoring of how the VA handles the processing of the DD Form 214-1 on the back end. ROA sees the VA home loan as a stabilizing force in what is a very volatile housing market. Homes are becoming increasingly more affordable, and we've even seen, you know, that sentiment trickle into some of the elections that just recently took place. There's been legislation in the past that ROA has supported, again, in the spirit of ensuring that every day in uniform counts towards eligibility, that would expand access to the VA home loan program for members of the Reserve and Guard. And in that spirit, the way to combat homelessness is to ensure that there's a home over that veteran's head. Related to the PACT Act in particular, I think most, if not all, the organizations would agree that from the numbers that we've seen and from what we've heard, that the PACT Act has been wildly successful. But, you know, to your point, there is still more that needs to be done. I think that when we look at the presumptive authority, if the system, if the institution could be trusted to always, you know, not just do right by the veteran, but then also to follow the law and account for the difficulties that may exist in proving that an injury or ailment was service-connected, that the presumptive authority wouldn't have been necessary in the first place. And so when we look at what the future holds for this, the presumptive authority is that benchmark that has been established. And in that line, in order to build on the progress from the PACT Act, and we hope that perhaps this could be included in PACT Act 2.0. We've been working with your staff on this as well. is the establishment of a presumption of service connection for those service members who were in the Pentagon on 9/11 and then were required to return for duty as early as the very next day. There are alternative programs that focus on 9/11 healthcare and also 9/11 victims' compensation. But for those service members, active and reserve, who were in the Pentagon from the period of September the 11th, returned for duty as early the next day, there till November 19th, 2001, which is the date that the Pentagon was deemed clear for people to return, potentially without being put in harm's way from the toxicants that were in that building. Those service members are left behind. And so we were very thankful to see Representative Supermanyan sponsor the Susan E. Lucas 9/11 Service Member Fairness Act, which would establish that presumption of service connection for that limited cohort of veterans, which we estimate based on historical workforce data as well as some combat casualty data to be around 10,000 veterans that particular presumption would cover. And so we would respectfully request and advocate that legislation be included in a PACT Act 2.0 or whether it passes in another vehicle or as a standalone as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I was very naive to think that we could get everybody in PACT, the original PACT Act, but examples like this keep coming up. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. Kayla Williams.
Thank you so much, Ranking Member Takano. I just want to very briefly amplify points that Lori and Joe were making earlier about minority veterans who will be disproportionately suffering in certain situations, and mention that we have a looming challenge for those who are being kicked out of the military now for political reasons, including our transgender brothers and sisters, as well as, for example, African-American soldiers, service members who may need shaving waivers are now being persecuted. For those who are pushed out of the military without having been able to be in long enough to earn eligibility for VA care and benefits, they're going to be disproportionately at risk for homelessness and many other challenges that have been brought up. And so in the long run, thinking about how we can make these veterans whole when they are being harmed because of political witch hunt that is going on right now is something I think we should start to think about when we are in a position to be able to support them. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm going to call on Colonel Sainz and Mario Marquez, and then we'll be at time. So just so for everyone, but thank you for bringing that up, Kayla. I'm hoping there's litigation that is being pursued in these particular cases, but Colonel Sainz?
Thank you very much. In line with Kayla's point, I think it's important for all of us to remember in this day and age, in this current politicized climate, that if you served in our military, then you deserve the benefits that have been put forward for you. And your immigration status should not affect your ability to access those benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I've had experience with veterans that were abroad and Tijuana specifically, and it's a challenge making sure that because they still are entitled to their benefits, whether it's education, whether it's health, it is difficult, and making sure that they get access to those benefits is going to be a real challenge. Mario Vasquez.
Thank you, Ranking Member. My last comment has to do with compensation and pension exams. In light of all the conversation about toxic exposures, about systemic reforms that Jose brought up, and really the entirety of the conversation, PVA, I wanted to backstop you on this. One of the things that we've seen is the impact that the amount of improper, inappropriate CMP exams are having on the disability claim process. Getting a veteran from service to actual health care in the VA system is completely being derailed by the problems, the myriad of issues that you probably know with that third-party contractor system. We are asking that we implement rigid oversight, quality assurance, and accountability of third-party contractors so that we can better facilitate and get these veterans from uniform into the VA system and getting the care that they deserve. And that's really my comment, Ranking Member. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I apologize, Mr. Marquez. I keep calling you Mr. Vasquez. But thank you for your comment. I want to thank everyone for being here today and for the contributions you've made to enlarging my understanding and that of my staff of the most emergent issues that are confronting your memberships. We have a uniquely solemn and sacred charge on the Veterans Affairs Committee to serve those who served, and I remain focused on that mission. And I am always, after these conversations, truly reinvigorated after witnessing the strength of your respective advocacies. As I've said in the beginning, there is no better voice to advocate for veterans than that of the veteran. But I can assure you that I will continue to fight to deliver what you deserve, what your members deserve. And I will continue to shine a light on bad faith attempts to chip away at what you have earned. And I believe very strongly that you and I are partners in that effort. Yet while I wish I could say that our collective task is going to get easier, for now, I cannot. I can only say that it will require commitment, resolve, and an unwavering drive to do what is right. We will all need to dig deep into the American grit. Speaker Emerita was once told by a veteran, embrace the suck, is what she said. Whenever we had a tough moment in the caucus, when we were in a tight spot, she would say to all of us in the caucus meeting, members, it's time to embrace the suck. I know you have this ability, this American grit that you have and that you'll keep up the fight. So our strength as a nation is due in large part to those who stand up and defend it, oftentimes in dangerous circumstances, far from comfort and convenience. It is an inner strength, a spiritual strength that I have been blessed to witness in my time visiting with veterans and active duty service members alike. And in the face of strong headwinds, it is a strength that we will need to call on as we continue pushing for greater benefits, access, and accountability. And as the great Dr. Martin Luther King once said, and as a favorite quote of Leader Jeffries, press on.